Returning a faulty product. Hey everyone, and welcome back to Story-Driven English. Have you ever bought something exciting? Something you saved up for? Something you really looked forward to using, only for it to, well, spectacularly fail? Like, really comically, messily fail? Today we've got a story about exactly that. It's about the soaring heights of anticipation, the crushing lows of disappointment, a coffee machine with a rather explosive personality, and the epic quest we sometimes face called returning a faulty product. It's funny, a little bit stressful, definitely relatable, and packed with useful English vocabulary. If you want to improve your English while enjoying fun, engaging stories like this, make sure you hit that subscribe button right now and ring the notification bell so you don't miss our next adventure. Trust me, you don't want to miss out. All right, grab a comforting beverage, hopefully made by a reliable machine, settle in, and let's dive into Arthur's considerable coffee catastrophe. Arthur Pendelton wasn't a man given to wild impulses or extravagant desires. His life moved at a comfortable, predictable pace, like a well-maintained grandfather clock. He found joy in the predictable rhythm of the week, the Tuesday crossword, the Friday fish and chips, the Sunday morning quietude punctuated only by the rustle of newspaper pages. But within this calm existence resided one deep, abiding passion: coffee. For Arthur, coffee wasn't just a morning beverage. It was a ritual, a tiny, accessible luxury, a fragrant anchor in the sometimes choppy seas of daily life. He cherished the process, the selection of beans, the brief whir of the grinder, the comforting gurgle of his old reliable but admittedly basic drip coffee maker. For years, this machine, affectionately nicknamed Old Faithful, despite its slightly stained carafe and tendency to sigh wheezily during brewing, had served him well. It produced coffee that was fine, perfectly adequate, drinkable. But lately, Arthur had found himself dreaming. These dreams were fueled by glossy magazine advertisements featuring impossibly chic individuals in sun-drenched kitchens, casually sipping beverages crowned with frothy milk art. They were amplified by online videos where charismatic hosts demonstrated gleaming chrome contraptions capable of producing espressos, lattes, cappuccinos, macchiatos, a whole Italian cafe menu, at the mere touch of a button. His online searches became more frequent, bordering on obsessive. He compared specifications, energy ratings, water tank capacities. He learned about bar pressure and conical burr grinders. He read user reviews, glowing 5-star testimonials promising coffee nirvana, interspersed with furious 1-star rants detailing leaks, malfunctions, and existential despair caused by malfunctioning appliances. Through this digital fog of information, one name consistently emerged, shining brighter than the rest: the Super-Duper Whizzbang coffee maker 5000. The name itself was a masterpiece of marketing hyperbole. It sounded less like a kitchen appliance, and more like a device from a science fiction movie. The Whizzbang 5000 didn't just brew coffee, it orchestrated it. It boasted 16 programmable settings, a self-cleaning cycle, a built-in bean grinder with adjustable coarseness, Bluetooth connectivity. Arthur wasn't entirely sure why a coffee maker needed Bluetooth, but it sounded impressive. And the pièce de résistance, a turbo froth master milk frother that looked capable of whipping milk into architectural structures. The price tag was, to put it mildly, significant. It represented several months' worth of Arthur's discretionary spending budget, the small fund he usually allocated to books, garden gnomes, and the occasional fancy biscuit. He agonized. Was it practical? Was it excessive? Could any coffee machine truly be worth the cost of a small weekend break? He created spreadsheets comparing the cost per cup versus his current setup. He tried to rationalize the purchase as an investment in his daily happiness. He even dreamt one night that the Whizzbang 5000 spoke to him in a soothing robotic voice, promising unparalleled morning joy. Finally, after weeks of internal debate that rivaled a parliamentary session, Arthur made his decision. He would redo. He deserved a little high-tech luxury. He deserved cafe-quality coffee without having to change out of his slippers. With a sense of thrilling resolve, he put on his good coat, checked his wallet, and marched towards Electro World. Electro World was an assault on the senses. Acres of brightly lit displays showcased the latest technological marvels. Televisions bigger than his living room wall glowed with hyper-realistic images. Laptops gleamed invitingly. Drones hovered in mesh cages. The air hummed with the low thrum of electricity and the piped-in, relentlessly cheerful pop music. Arthur usually found the place overwhelming, navigating its aisles with the cautious air of an explorer in an alien landscape. But today, he had a mission. He located the small appliances section, a dazzling canyon of chrome and plastic. And there it was. The Super-Duper Whizzbang Coffee Maker 5000 sat on a pedestal, illuminated by its own dedicated spotlight. It was even more beautiful, more imposing than in the pictures. Its polished surfaces reflected the store lights like dark mirrors. Its buttons and dials promised a world of caffeinated possibilities. Another shopper, a woman peering intently at a complex-looking blender, glanced over. "Thinking of getting one?" she asked Arthur conversationally. "My cousin has one. Says it changed his life. Bit noisy though, apparently." Arthur merely nodded, a thrill running through him. Changed his life. He approached the display with reverence. He gently touched the cool metal finish. A sales assistant, young, enthusiastic, and armed with a laminated features list, materialized beside him. "Excellent choice, sir. The Whizzbang 5000 is our top-of-the-line model. 16 settings, integrated grinder. Barista-grade results every time. We've sold dozens this week." Arthur didn't need convincing. He located a boxed version on the shelf below, hefting its considerable weight. The colorful packaging depicted steam gracefully rising from a perfect cup, held by a hand adorned with an expensive-looking watch. It radiated sophistication. He carried the box to the checkout, feeling a mixture of exhilaration and mild financial panic. The cashier scanned the barcode, and the number that flashed on the screen made Arthur wince internally, but he handed over his bank card with forced nonchalance. Transaction approved. The Whizzbang 5000 was his. He practically floated out of Electro World, clutching the large box like a trophy. The unboxing ceremony back in his own kitchen was conducted with meticulous care. Arthur laid down a clean tea towel on the counter to protect the surfaces. He slid the inner box out of the glossy sleeve. He carefully lifted the machine itself, nestled securely in custom-molded recycled cardboard, out of its container. It felt solid, substantial. He unwrapped the power cord, The water tank, the drip tray, the milk frother attachment, and a small bag containing a cleaning brush and a tiny mysterious plastic scoop. He lined up all the components like surgical instruments. Then he turned his attention to the instruction manual. It was, as previously noted, thick, spiral-bound, printed on glossy paper, filled with diagrams, charts, warnings, and step-by-step guides in 12 different languages. Arthur, being a methodical man, decided to read the English section from start to finish before attempting anything. He learned about water hardness levels, descaling procedures, the optimal temperature for frothing different types of milk, dairy and non-dairy. Options were covered extensively, and the precise meaning of various error codes indicated by combinations of flashing lights. It took him nearly 45 minutes, during which time his anticipation grew to almost unbearable levels. Finally, he was ready. He rinsed the water tank thoroughly, as instructed. He filled it with expensive bottled spring water he'd bought, specially for the occasion. Only the purest H2O for his whizzbang. He selected his absolute favorite coffee beans, single-origin Ethiopian Yirgacheffe, known for their delicate floral notes. He poured them into the integrated grinder compartment. He consulted the manual again, Chapter 3, Section 2, Paragraph 5, and set the grinder to the recommended medium-fine setting. He placed his beloved oversized mug, the world's okayest grandpa, a cherished piece of ironic pottery from his niece, onto the drip tray platform. It looked small beneath the imposing chrome spout of the whizzbang. He took a deep, satisfying breath. The moment had arrived. He navigated the intuitive, according to the manual control panel, and selected the perfect morning brew function. He pressed the glowing start button. The machine sprang to life with an impressive sequence of whirs and clicks. Blue lights illuminated the water tank. The grinder spun into action with a surprisingly loud, high-pitched whine, pulverizing the precious Ethiopian beans. Arthur smiled. This was it. The sound of progress. The sound of superior coffee in the making. The grinder stopped. A moment of silence. Then, a gentle hum began as the machine started heating the water. The blue lights pulsed softly. Arthur leaned closer, trying to catch the first hint of that magical coffee aroma. That's when things started to go sideways. The gentle hum abruptly changed pitch, becoming a strained guttural groan, like a large animal in distress. The softly pulsing blue lights began to flash erratically, rapidly, like a distress beacon on a sinking ship. Red lights joined the frantic display. A new sound emerged. A rhythmic clanking, deep within the machine's bowels, as if someone had dropped a handful of bolts inside. Arthur straightened up, his smile faltering. Is that supposed to happen? He murmured aloud. The manual hadn't mentioned anything about internal clanking or disco lighting effects during a standard brew cycle. He cautiously placed a hand on the side of the machine. It was vibrating. Not gently, but with a worrying intensity. He could feel the clanking through the metal casing. Steam began to vent aggressively from small openings he hadn't noticed before, hissing like an angry goose. The smell in the air wasn't the delightful aroma of brewing coffee, but something sharper, more acrid. The smell of overheating plastic and something vaguely burnt. Panic began to bubble in Arthur's chest. Should he press stop? Was there an emergency stop button? He scanned the control panel frantically, but the labels were suddenly incomprehensible hieroglyphics. Before he could react further, The Whizzbang 5000 let out a tremendous shudder, rattling the countertop. There was a bizarre noise, a sort of choked gurgle mixed with a high-pressure release valve sound, like a startled walrus attempting to play the bagpipes. And then, detonation. It wasn't a drip, it wasn't a pour, it was an eruption. With astonishing force, a geyser of scalding, muddy, half-brewed coffee exploded upwards from the spout. It wasn't the elegant stream depicted on the box. It was a violent, uncontrolled torrent. It shot straight up, hitting the pristine white ceiling of Arthur's kitchen with a wet, percussive splat that echoed in the sudden, stunned silence. Arthur stood frozen, eyes wide, jaw slack. He watched, mesmerized by the sheer physics of the disaster, as the brown liquid reached its apex and then began its inevitable descent. Gravity asserted itself with cruel indifference. Hot, gritty coffee rained down. It coated the gleaming white cabinet doors, dripped down the walls, puddled on the countertops, splashed across the front of the refrigerator, and cascaded onto the linoleum floor. His world's okayest grandpa mug, caught in the initial blast wave, was flung sideways off the platform. It hit the tiled floor with a sickening crunch, shattering into a dozen jagged pieces. The coffee cascade drenched Arthur himself. He felt the hot liquid soak through his shirt, plaster his hair to his scalp, and run down his face. He tasted the bitter, burnt flavor. The Super-Duper Whizzbang 5000. Its chaotic act complete gave one final, pathetic wheeze. A small plume of steam curled from its spout, like the smoke from a tiny, malevolent cannon. Its frantic lights flickered out, plunging the control panel into darkness. Silence descended, broken only by the steady drip, drip, drip of coffee falling from the ceiling onto the floor, the counters, and, with infuriating regularity, onto the top of Arthur's head. He slowly, deliberately, raised a hand and wiped the coffee grounds from his forehead. He looked around his kitchen. It was a scene of utter devastation. Brown streaks ran down the walls like grotesque paint. Puddles gathered on the floor. The air hung thick and heavy with the smell of failure. Burnt coffee, hot plastic, and shattered ceramic. His favorite mug lay in pieces, a casualty of technological warfare. And Arthur himself stood there, sticky, damp, bewildered, and smelling strongly of a barista's worst nightmare. The Super-Duper Whizzbang 5000 sat silently amidst the chaos, looking smug and inert. "Right," Arthur said, his voice hoarse. He addressed the machine directly. That was not by any definition a perfect morning brew. The initial shock began to recede, replaced by a wave of profound disappointment, which quickly curdled into a hot, simmering anger. This wasn't just a malfunction. It was an assault. An expensive, high-tech assault on his kitchen, his dignity, and his favorite mug. He had saved, he had researched, he had anticipated. For this? This coffee apocalypse? Oh no. This would not do. This machine was going back. First, however, there was the small matter of the extensive, sticky, pervasive mess. Arthur surveyed the damage with a heavy heart. It looked like a Jackson Pollock painting, if Pollock had worked exclusively in lukewarm coffee. He sighed. Arming himself with a formidable arsenal of sponges, cloths, paper towels, floor cleaner, and a mop, he began the arduous cleanup operation. It took well over an hour. He scrubbed coffee stains off the ceiling, wiped down cabinets, mopped the floor twice. He carefully gathered the fragments of his beloved mug, placing them on a paper towel with the reverence due to a fallen comrade. He wiped down the offending coffee machine, noting with grim satisfaction the faint brown residue near the spout that even vigorous scrubbing couldn't entirely remove. Evidence. With the kitchen restored to a semblance of normalcy, though the faint aroma of burnt coffee lingered stubbornly, Arthur turned his attention to the next hurdle, the return process. He wasn't a confrontational person by nature. He disliked haggling, complaining, or making a fuss. The prospect of standing at a customer service counter and trying to explain the concept of a coffee volcano to a potentially jaded employee filled him with a sense of deep unease. Images flooded his mind. Skeptical expressions, bureaucratic procedures, refusals, arguments. But then, he pictured the coffee geyser hitting his ceiling, the shattered remains of his mug, and the significant three-figure sum that had departed from his bank account. His resolve hardened. The whiz-bang must be returned, justice must be served, and most importantly, his money must be refunded. But before the confrontation came the quest for the all-powerful, often mythical proof of purchase, the receipt. Arthur, despite his generally organized nature, had a blind spot when it came to receipts. They seemed possessed of a mischievous life of their own, capable of teleporting from designated safe places into oblivion. He started with the obvious location, his wallet. He carefully extracted every item: credit cards, a library card, a photo of his niece pulling a funny face, several expired coupons, a loyalty card for a bookstore he frequented, but no Electro World receipt. Next, the pockets of the coat he had worn yesterday. He patted them down hopefully. His fingers encountered a crumpled tissue, a fluff-covered mint, 2-pence coins, and a rogue button. No receipt. He moved to his desk, specifically to the drawer labeled Important Documents and Warranties. Opening this drawer was always an adventure. It contained a stratified history of his consumer life. Old phone bills, the warranty for a VCR player he hadn't owned since 2005, bank statements offering a sobering glimpse into past financial anxieties, user manuals for gadgets long gone, a digital camera with a staggering 2-megapixel resolution, takeaway menus offering tempting but unhealthy dinner options, and a surprising number of spare keys for unknown locks. He sifted through the paper mountain, his hope dwindling with each passing layer. He found the receipt for the kettle he'd bought last year. He found the instructions for his lawnmower. He even found a faded postcard from a seaside holiday in 1998. But the Electro World receipt, the golden ticket back to solvency, remained elusive. A cold knot of dread formed in Arthur's stomach. Had he been careless? Had he, in his excitement, yesterday, simply discarded it with the outer packaging? He remembered consolidating the various bits of cardboard and plastic. Had the receipt been amongst them? He glanced towards the recycling bin by the back door. Empty. The recycling had been collected this morning, right on schedule. The bin lorry had rumbled away just as he was contemplating his first, ill-fated cup of whiz-bang coffee. Had he inadvertently thrown away his only chance of a refund? The thought was horrifying. He sank into a kitchen chair, burying his face in his hands. The lingering scent of burnt coffee mocked him. The space on the counter where his mug used to sit seemed accusingly empty. The silent whiz-bang radiated malice. Maybe this was a sign. Maybe he was destined to live with this expensive, potentially explosive monument to poor purchasing decisions. He could hide it in the cupboard, buy a cheap replacement, and try to forget the whole humiliating episode. But the injustice gnawed at him, and the money, it was a lot of money. No, he couldn't give up. He had to think. He forced himself to reconstruct yesterday's arrival home. He'd entered the house carrying the large Electro-World bag. He'd put the bag down. Where? Right there in the hallway, next to the umbrella stand. He distinctly remembered. Lifting the main whiz-bang box out almost immediately, eager to begin the unboxing ritual. What else had been in the carrier bag? He closed his eyes, concentrating. There was the machine box, obviously. Some protective padding, the thick instruction manual, and... yes. He remembered the cashier folding the receipt and placing it carefully, flat, right in the bottom of the branded plastic bag before putting the main box on top. Hope surged anew. He scrambled out of his chair and hurried to the hallway. The Electro-World carrier bag was still there, crumpled forlornly next to the shoe rack where he'd dropped it yesterday. He snatched it up, his heart hammering against his ribs. It felt mostly empty, rustling promisingly. He reached inside, fingers sweeping the bottom surface. They brushed against paper, a folded slip of paper. He pulled it out with trembling hands. The distinctive blue and yellow Electro-World logo. The date. The item description. SD Whizzbang 5000 COF MCHN. And at the bottom, the eye-watering total amount. He'd found it. Arthur let out a whoop of triumph, clutching the receipt as if it were the Holy Grail. He smoothed it out carefully and placed it safely in his wallet, this time ensuring it was in a secure compartment. Phase 1. Locate receipt. Completed against considerable odds. Now for Phase 2. Operation Return. Arthur approached the task of repackaging the Whizzbang 5000 with grim determination, getting the machine and its numerous accoutrements back into the custom-molded cardboard supports, and then into the box proved significantly more challenging than getting them out. Parts seemed to have expanded slightly. He wrestled with the milk frother attachment, which refused to nestle back into its designated slot. The power cord seemed to have gained sentience and actively resisted being coiled neatly. After several minutes of strategic pushing, jiggling, and muttered curses, he finally managed to get everything back inside, although the box now bulged ominously at the seams and made suspicious rattling noises when moved. He taped it shut securely, perhaps using slightly more tape than strictly necessary. He gave the exterior a final wipe down, though the faint coffee-stained battle scars remained visible upon close inspection. He stood before the hallway mirror, holding the bulky box, and practiced his opening lines. Good morning. I wish to return this coffee machine as it is fundamentally flawed and attempted to repaint my kitchen. Too dramatic? Hello. This device malfunctioned spectacularly during its initial operation, resulting in widespread coffee distribution. I require a refund. Too formal? Hi, yeah, this thing exploded. Coffee everywhere. Mug broken. Need my money back. Too blunt? He sighed. This was going to be awkward. He decided the direct, factual approach was best. It's faulty. It erupted. Yes, that seemed concise yet informative. Carrying the large, awkward box, Arthur set off for Electro-World once more. The return journey felt like a walk of shame. The box seemed to broadcast his failure as a consumer. He imagined fellow pedestrians whispering, "Look, there goes a man defeated by a coffee machine." He opted for the bus, struggling to maneuver the box down the narrow aisle. He eventually found a seat, placing the box on the adjacent one, earning disapproving glares from passengers forced to stand. He spent the journey rehearsing his explanation mentally and trying to ignore the slight rattling emanating from the box beside him. Arriving back at Electro World, the bright lights and cheerful music now felt like a deliberate mockery of his situation. He navigated the familiar aisles, his steps heavy with purpose towards the back of the store, where the customer service and returns desk was located, an area often spoken of in hushed tones, usually reserved for describing visits to the dentist. As he feared, a queue snaked back from the counter. It seemed returning faulty goods was a thriving local industry. Arthur joined the end of the line, shifting the weight of the box. He surveyed his fellow returners, a fellowship of the disgruntled. Directly ahead of him was the woman he'd seen earlier near the blenders. She was now holding a toaster aloft. "Look," she was explaining animatedly to her companion in the queue. "Perfectly golden on this side," she demonstrated with an imaginary slice of bread, "and utterly pale and anemic on this side. It's psychologically damaging to start the day with uneven toast." Arthur couldn't help but sympathize slightly. Before her, a young man with brightly colored hair was attempting to return a large, sophisticated-looking drone, which had several twigs and leaves embedded in its propellers. "It just went rogue," he was insisting to the impassive representative behind the counter. "I programmed a simple flight path over my garden and it suddenly veered left, cleared Mrs. Higgins's prize-winning begonias like a guided missile, and dive-bombed her garden gnome. She's threatening legal action over gnomicide." Arthur clutched his coffee maker box. Suddenly, his coffee volcano story didn't seem quite so outlandish. At least his faulty product hadn't caused potential litigation with the neighbors. The queue shuffled forward with glacial slowness. Finally, after what felt like an eternity listening to tales of woe involving self-shredding printers and televisions that only showed static during important football matches, it was Arthur's turn. He hoisted the heavy, bulging box onto the high counter with a grunt. Behind the counter stood the arbiter of returns, a woman whose name badge proclaimed, "Brenda, happy to help." Brenda possessed an air of weary authority, sharp eyes that seemed capable of detecting exaggeration at 50 paces, and hair sprayed into a helmet of professional immobility. Her smile, when she offered one, didn't quite reach her eyes. She looked like she had personally witnessed every possible permutation of electronic failure and consumer complaint, and was thoroughly unimpressed by the human condition as a result. "Next," Brenda stated, her voice flat, betraying none of the happiness promised by her badge. Arthur cleared his throat. "Good morning," he began, aiming for a tone that was polite, reasonable, but undeniably firm. "I purchased this Super-Duper Whizzbang coffee maker 5000 here yesterday. Unfortunately, I need to return it." Brenda raised a perfectly plucked eyebrow. "Reason for return?" she asked, poised over her keyboard. "It's faulty," Arthur stated plainly. "Define faulty," Brenda countered, her fingers hovering. This seemed to be her standard opening gambit. "Well," Arthur took a steadying breath, Time for the unvarnished truth. It doesn't perform its primary function correctly. In fact, it performs it in a rather alarming and destructive manner. Brenda's gaze sharpened slightly. Go on. I followed the setup instructions meticulously, Arthur explained, deciding to preempt the inevitable user error accusations. Filtered, water, correct grind consistency as per Chapter 3, Section 2, Paragraph 5 of the manual, everything by the book. I pressed the perfect morning brew button. He paused for dramatic effect. Instead of brewing coffee, the machine made a series of disturbing noises, vibrated violently, and then it erupted. Brenda stared at him, her expression unreadable. Erupted, she repeated, the word hanging in the air between them. Yes, Arthur confirmed, feeling a surge of conviction. He was the victim here. Like a volcano, a geyser of scalding hot coffee. It shot vertically upwards, hit the ceiling, rained down everywhere. It destroyed my favorite mug. My kitchen required extensive cleaning. He gestured towards the box. It was less a coffee maker, more an engine of caffeinated chaos. Brenda remained silent for a moment, her eyes fixed on Arthur's face, seemingly assessing his sanity. Then she sighed, a quiet exhalation of profound weariness. Sir, these machines undergo rigorous quality control. Are you absolutely certain? You didn't perhaps overfill the water tank? Or use an incorrect type of bean? Sometimes oily beans can clog the mechanism. Absolutely certain, Arthur interrupted, perhaps a little too loudly. The man behind him, holding a suspiciously silent electric toothbrush, shifted impatiently. I measured the water precisely. I used premium non-oily beans. This wasn't user error. It was a catastrophic machine failure. It actively attacked my kitchen environment. Brenda held up a hand. Receipt? She asked curtly. Yes. Arthur produced it with a flourish, sliding it across the counter. Brenda snatched it, scanned the barcode with practiced efficiency, and her fingers flew across the keyboard, consulting the store's digital oracle. Purchase confirmed, she stated. Okay. Let's have a look at the alleged volcano machine. She maneuvered the bulging box towards her, and with a strength that belied her frame, lifted the Whizzbang 5000 onto the counter. The rattling noise was clearly audible. She opened the box, peered inside at the slightly coffee-stained machine, nestled awkwardly in its packaging. She lifted it out. She examined it closely, turning it over, inspecting the spout and the water compartment. Her sharp eyes didn't miss the faint brown tide marks near the nozzle. It does have a certain aroma, she conceded, wrinkling her nose delicately. A sort of overbrewed bouquet. She located the power cord and plugged the machine into a nearby socket. A single red light on the panel flickered uncertainly for a second, then died. Complete darkness. She pressed the on button. Nothing. She pressed the perfect morning brew button. Silence. She tried another button, then another. The machine remained stubbornly, unequivocally dead. Brenda murmured, tapping a long fingernail against the inert machine. She poked at the bean grinder compartment. Well, it's certainly not powering on now, is it? She looked back at her computer screen, then at the dead machine, then at Arthur's anxious face. Arthur held his breath. This was the moment of truth. Right, Brenda said, making a decision. Technically, standard procedure for a high-value item like this involves sending it to our central technical assessment facility. They would diagnose the fault, determine the cause, and ascertain if it falls under the manufacturer's warranty, or if misuse is suspected. This process, she added, fixing him with a stern gaze, can take between 10 to 14 working days, sometimes longer if they're busy. Arthur's spirits plummeted. 2 weeks? 2 weeks of uncertainty. 2 weeks without coffee. Old Faithful had been retired to the attic. 2 weeks wondering if he'd ever see his money again? The prospect was bleak. Brenda must have seen the despair in his eyes. Or perhaps she glanced at the growing queue behind him, which now included someone trying to return a single, forlorn-looking sock. She let out another sigh, this one sounding more like resignation than weariness. However, she continued, leaning slightly closer conspiratorially, given that the item is completely unresponsive, displays evidence of, let's call it liquid expulsion residue. She gestured towards the stains. And frankly, this particular model, she lowered her voice further, has had a few documented cases of over-enthusiastic brewing. I might be prepared to expedite the process. Arthur felt a glimmer of hope. Expedite. Against my initial assessment of the volcano narrative, Brenda clarified, with a hint of dry humor entering her tone for the first time. I'm going to authorize a direct return for a faulty item. Saves us paperwork, saves you waiting. So, Mr. Pendleton, what's your preference? Full refund to the original payment card, store credit, or would you like to risk an exchange for another Whizzbang 5000? She raised an eyebrow suggestively at the last option. The relief that washed over Arthur was immense, almost dizzying. He felt like a condemned man granted a last-minute pardon. A refund, please, he gasped, perhaps a little too eagerly. Full refund back onto my card would be absolutely perfect, thank you. He wouldn't risk another Whizzbang 5000 if they paid him to take it. Brenda nodded, her fingers flying over the keyboard once more. The till beeped, a confirmation slip printed out. Okay, that's processed. The funds should reflect in your account. Within 3 to 5 business days, depending on your bank. Here is your return receipt. Arthur took the slip of paper, handling it with care. Thank you, he said, sincerity warming his voice. Thank you so much, Brenda. I really appreciate you. Expediting. Brenda almost smiled. A tiny twitch at the corner of her mouth. No problem, Mr. Pendleton. My advice? She added, leaning forward again. Next time, maybe something with fewer buttons, less personality. Excellent advice, Arthur agreed fervently. I shall take it under serious consideration. He practically skipped away from the customer service counter, leaving Brenda to deal with the man holding the electric toothbrush, which had now started making faint buzzing noises. He felt light, liberated, victorious. He had stared into the abyss of faulty electronics and bureaucratic procedures, and he had emerged, refund secured. On his way towards the exit, he passed the small appliances section again. His eyes inevitably fell upon the pristine display model of the Super-Duper Whizzbang Coffee Maker 5000, still gleaming under its spotlight, looking deceptively innocent and full of promise. Arthur shuddered involuntarily and quickened his pace. Never again. He didn't go straight home. Instead, guided by Brenda's wise counsel and his own recent trauma, he walked a few blocks further to a small, old-fashioned independent hardware and appliance store. The kind of place that smelled faintly of dust and WD-40, run by a man who looked like he understood fuses. There, nestled between sensible kettles and robust toasters, Arthur spotted it. A simple, unpretentious drip coffee maker. It was cream-colored plastic, had a glass carafe with clear markings, a reusable filter basket, and precisely one button. On-off. No Bluetooth, no grinder, no turbo froth master, no potential for volcanic eruptions. It looked sturdy, reliable, and reassuringly dull. Arthur bought it without hesitation. It cost less than 1/10 of the price of the Whizzbang. Back in the relative safety of his own kitchen, Arthur unpacked his new modest machine. The instruction leaflet was a single folded sheet of paper. He rinsed the carafe and filter basket, filled the tank with tap water, no more expensive bottled water, added a scoop of his regular, reliable supermarket coffee grounds, put the carafe in place and pressed the on button. The machine responded with a gentle, reassuring gurgle. A small orange light came on. There was no alarming whining, no frantic flashing, no ominous clanking. Just the quiet, familiar sound of water heating and dripping steadily through the grounds. A few minutes later, the carafe was full of steaming, dark coffee. The aroma filled the kitchen, warm, rich, inviting, and entirely free of burnt plastic undertones. Arthur poured himself a cup using his backup mug, a plain blue one, lacking personality but thankfully intact. He took a cautious sip. It was coffee. Hot, strong, flavorful, perfectly brewed coffee. It wasn't going to win any awards at a barista championship, it wouldn't inspire sonnets, but it was undeniably, wonderfully, reliably coffee. He sat down at his kitchen table, cradling the warm mug, savoring the simple, uncomplicated pleasure. The whole Super-Duper Whizzbang 5000 saga. The anticipation, the expense, the dramatic explosion, the stressful cleanup, the quest for the receipt, the return ordeal felt like a bizarre, slightly surreal dream. It had been annoying, messy, and temporarily costly, but looking back it was also faintly comical. A cautionary tale about the perils of excessive technological ambition in the pursuit of a simple cup of coffee. He smiled, thinking of Brenda's advice. Fewer buttons, less personality. That sounded like an excellent life philosophy, at least when it came to kitchen appliances. For now, he was perfectly content with his simple, predictable, non-erupting coffee maker. And perhaps, he mused, he'd ask his niece for a new mug for his birthday. Maybe one that said, "Survived the Whizzbang 5000. Wow, what an ordeal for Arthur. From high-tech dreams to a coffee-covered nightmare, and back to simple satisfaction. It just goes to show, sometimes the fanciest option isn't always the best. Right? Have you ever had a similar experience with a faulty product? Share your stories in the comments below. I'd love to read them. Now let's review some of the key words and phrases from Arthur's adventure to help you lock them into your English vocabulary. Key vocabulary. Repeated throughout. Faulty, not working correctly. Having a defect or fault, e.g., he realized the expensive machine was faulty. Product. An item that is manufactured or refined for sale, e.g., returning the faulty product was essential. Return. To give, put, or send something back to its place or owner. E.g., Arthur had to return the coffee maker to the store. Refund, a repayment of a sum of money. E.g., he was relieved to get a full refund. Receipt, a piece of paper confirming that money or goods have been received. E.g., finding the receipt was a difficult quest. Customer service, the assistance and advice provided by a company to those people who buy or use its products or services. 1. E.g., he explained the problem at the customer service counter. Machine, appliance, an apparatus using mechanical power, like electricity, and having several parts, performing a particular task, especially in the home. E.g., the new appliance malfunctioned dramatically. Coffee maker, a machine or pot for brewing coffee. E.g., his old coffee maker was reliable unlike the new one. Manual, instructions, a book or pamphlet giving instructions or information. E.g., he read the thick instruction manual carefully. Fault, defect, malfunction, an imperfection, flaw, or failure to function normally. E.g., the machine had a serious malfunction. Exchange, an act of giving one thing and receiving another, usually similar, in return. E.g., he didn't want an exchange, he wanted his money back. Store, shop, a place where things are bought and sold. E.g., he returned the product to. The electronics store, purchase, the act of buying something or the item bought. E.g., he regretted his expensive purchase almost immediately. Box, packaging, the container or wrapping for a product. E.g., repacking the item into its original box was tricky. Counter, a long, flat-topped fixture in a store or bank across which business is conducted with customers. E.g., Brenda processed the refund at the counter. Reliable, consistently good in quality or performance. Able to be trusted. E.g., he decided to buy a simple, reliable coffee maker instead. Instructions, detailed information about how something should be done or operated. E.g., he followed the instructions precisely. Faulty, repeated for emphasis. Adjective meaning not working correctly. E.g., dealing with a faulty product can be frustrating. Try to use a few of these words when you're speaking or writing. In English this week, the more you practice, the more natural they'll become. If you enjoyed Arthur's story and found this lesson helpful, please do me a huge favor. Hit that like button. Share this video with anyone else who is learning English. And most importantly, subscribe to Story Driven English and click the notification bell so you don't miss our next story. Your support means the world to us. Thanks for watching, keep practicing, and see you in the next video.